Hi, everybody, and welcome to Best Podcast Ever, where three idiots you don't know talk about a hobby you've never heard of. And again, that is a blatant lie, because this is another Brian and Mike episode.
Hey, Kevin almost was able to be here today, but it didn't quite work out. So,
was he actually going to be anywhere near town, or were we trying to just skip that race we all wanted to go to last night?
Well, there was that, but he also, he did mention that he could have been here this morning, but it is now 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, it is very much not morning right now.
We did. He was lobbying to skip the race last night, which I insisted that we do because I love that class, and my car was great, except that I forgot how to drive it, and Kevin won. And was then still complaining. So
we were all complaining about multiple different things. So let's get some facts down first. It was Sideways Group 5?
Yes.
And so apparently that was a race we had added late into the schedule last year. We didn't really write the rules down all that much, so we found out.
Yeah, I did not recall that because I had a hand in writing the schedule, and I had written that in for this one and just tentatively put same rules as last time. Now, interestingly, everybody did show up with the same cars they ran last time, so clearly that was not a problem, but it was trying to be a problem.
It was trying to be a problem. The good news is it did work out. The cars were even.
Yeah, it was very even. That's why I wanted to make sure we got it in this year. It was, a good diversity of cars. There were only 2 identical cars in the field. In fact, even only 2 of the same type of car.
Yeah.
3.
There was a long and a short tail Porsche.
There were 3 M1s, actually, come to think of it. But other than that, there were not even any other duplicate types of cars. And then, in spite of that, you had some slightly different setups and cars making their speed in different places on the track, which is always interesting. And yet, the heats were all pretty close.
We all seem to have the relative same idea of angle winder with some sort of flat-ish motor.
Yeah.
Whether that be a Scale Auto ball bearing motor, which is an amazing motor that for some reason Scale Auto has decided needs to stop existing.
It still exists in the long can.
Oh, it exists in the long can?
It does.
The short can?
They stopped making the short can version, which the only car with that I've ever driven is one of Kevin's, and it's ridiculously good in short can form, but that was the one they decided to stop making. The long can is great, but not every car can fit it, so.
Yep, and we actually ended up having an extended debate last night, and that's going to be the general theme of this episode, which is the rules of the race, not in the area we talked about last time, which is how to set up the car, but actually how you're running the race.
Right, so, in Formula One, they talk about the sporting regulations versus the technical regulations. So we are essentially talking about the sporting regulations, the conduct of the race, if you will, not the building of the cars.
So to start at the top, because we, of course, know how NJ Hobby runs their races, but for the people who aren't from New Jersey who listen to this, all 7 of them,
yes.
The first thing you do is you sign up and we tech your car. Then the second thing we do is we establish the order you're going to race in. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, we actually used to have these just little, we call them pills, they're just essentially marbles with numbers on them.
Yeah.
That's used for pool, I believe.
I guess, yeah.
I think it's for high shot, whatever.
It must be, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why else you would need that many numbers, yeah.
So we have these little numbers, and we used to hand them out, but then we kind of realized that takes way too long, and it involves just a little bit too many moving parts for this particular club. So the way we have our scoreboard set up is everybody has a magnet with their name on it, and we have a whiteboard, which is, of course, magnetized,
right,
that we slap your name on. So what happens is all those name tags are about the same size. I do work there, so I hold everything behind my back. I shuffle them like a stack of credit cards, and I ask people going around the room, name a number between 1 and how many people are still on the stack. They name a number. I go down from the top, and that's how you get on the board.
Makes sense.
It's the most random way I could possibly do it. I'm not seeing anything.
Right.
I never pick. I'm always asking... Sorry. I'm always asking someone to pick for me. But there becomes problems here because who you're racing next to can affect if you get into, say there's a final, or even just if there's no final, your overall score.
Right.
Because the way we race, and we might as well get into the different rules brackets now,
sure,
is called crash and burn. Right. So there's 4 people on the field, and you get points inverse to to your place of finish. So first place gets 4 points, second place gets 3, so on and so forth.
Right.
It would be just as easy if you put your order of finish down and whoever got the lowest number.
Right. You could really do anything. I mean, you could assign point values to the positions if you really wanted to. I mean, at one time we did. At one time we used the old Formula One point system of 8, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
When we had the 6-lane track.
But we have since simplified it to just 4, 3, 2, 1 for the 4-lane track.
Yeah.
And the problem came up last night where we had 2 heats, and one heat was considered stacked.
Yeah. And I mean, it'll happen. It's a random draw. But yeah, you always have that problem of, if you have multiple heats, you have that problem of one has, has much tighter competition than the other.
And with Crash and Burn, if you fall out in that heat, so there's 4 lanes, we're going to race 3 times per lane, and if you fall out, wherever you fell out is your order of finish. So if you were the first to fall out, you were 4th, and all the way up. So the question becomes, how do we maximize the amount of racing for each individual person racing? How do we make sure it's fair? Because the reason there were 2 heats is we had 8 people, and the theory is if you have 4 lanes and double the amount or more of the people per lanes, in theory, somebody can go straight through, get a perfect score, and then somebody else
can also get a
perfect score. To avoid that, we break it down into heats, but how do you make the heats fair? How do you make the racing fair?
Right. And it isn't, just to clarify, it's not, that it would be problematic if 2 people got perfect scores, but the point is that if someone is going through running a perfect score or close to it, they're eating up all the points, and the people who are on track with that person have fewer. They are basically picking up the pieces of what that person's leaving behind. Which then, if there are people who are never on track with that person, they have the advantage of not having to race that person. So,
and in theory, the heat system we have makes it more fair because even though, I didn't race against Kevin until the final.
Right.
Eventually, I did have to race with him.
Right. I mean, to an extent, it does mean that eventually everyone has to race everyone. The problem is that
that first heat, you had a lot of people who, if they were in the second heat, theoretically, we can't claim they would have.
Right. No,
but
there's no way of knowing.
They would have made the final.
But yeah, I mean, and it was less obvious in some ways. I mean, it happened last night, but in some ways, like the disparity between the good and bad cars was less than it is sometimes. Sometimes it becomes obvious in the final because the people who came out of one heat will crush the people that came out of the other heat.
Yeah.
Then it becomes obvious which one was the easy heat. You can't essentially neither of those allows you to fully eliminate the problem of who's racing against who to really say this is the person who did the best. You can never eliminate the element of luck completely from any competition because you could also say what if the model airplanes hanging over the track fell on one person and not everyone else. There's always some element of randomness.
There's always a million things that could have happened.
Right.
And even still, from the 2 heats was myself and one other person and Kevin and another person. And the final finishing order was Kevin, the person from my heat, then myself, and the person from Kevin's heat. So even that, it kind of proved that it did work. But the question is, if I am on the outside of a particularly wide racer, we'll say, somebody who really steps into the other lane on purpose.
Yeah.
That's going to affect my score in the grand scheme of things.
Yes, it is, because if you don't get off the line ahead of that person, you're going to be stuck behind them.
They're actively going to knock you off, and in Crash and Burn, now that's your order of finish, so there is incentive to hit someone.
Yeah, it's even more of a problem in Crash and Burn than in, say, a marshaled format, whatever marshaled format that is, and we'll get to some of those. It's definitely a limitation of that, because there's no incentive, or not no incentive, but it's tempting to think that your best bet, if you get stuck behind someone wide, is to just stay there and hope that other people fall out or that person falls out, and then that's your chance to pick up the points.
Because the theory is, if you're racing against somebody like that, you do stay behind them and you wait for them to step out. And now we're hitting them again.
Right.
We're purposely hitting and racing, which is okay. You stepped out wide. Slot cars have the pin that's keeping you in. If I hit you, your pin's going to come out. And again, I have advanced my position through contact, which is kind of what we're trying to avoid here.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, And even then, I mean, you do take it. I mean, you do take a chance hitting someone regardless because anything can happen once you make contact.
You might fall out and they might stay in.
Yeah, you really never know what's going to happen. I mean, you can play the percentages that if you are hitting someone with the front of your car, that it's going to dig your flag or pin into the slot more and possibly lift the other person. So chances are, if you're doing the hitting, from behind, you're going to stay in or have a better chance of staying in. But it's a risk regardless.
And the question is that part of racing, or is that just, and as we will all call it, because you're angry when you get knocked out, just bad racing? Because, I mean, we really don't swear at each other. There are still kids in the room.
Right.
But the most aggressive thing you can do if you're taking out is to look at somebody and go, okay, if you're just bad and that's how you need to win by knocking me out, by all means.
Right.
Because you're not going to win if you don't take me out, so it makes sense that you are.
Right.
And that's incredibly passive-aggressive, but what else are you going to say to the guy?
Right, and it's true. I mean, it does at least... I mean, if you are completely terrible, if your car is completely terrible and you're completely terrible, you're never going to find yourself in a position where you can gain that much by taking somebody out. But if you have a middling car and you don't mind, playing the game that way,
or the very final race last night, it came down to the absolute last heat for a race between first and second and third and fourth.
Yeah,
and it just so happened that we had 4 pretty vicious racers up there, myself included, and we raced clean that last heat because no one wants to be that guy who punted someone off and declared victory because they punted someone.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's part of the game, but again, in a marshaled format, the risk and reward balances out a little bit differently. And if somebody knocks you off, it will cost you some time, but it's possible that you can make up the time. Like, you're not done.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I mean, you could be, if with 4 people, or it could be even worse if you're on a 6-lane track and there's a difference between 6 points and 1 point.
Oh, yeah.
But you can easily throw 3 points away by getting clobbered, or also just by making a mistake.
Time,
I mean, you don't really get to make up for your mistakes. I mean, you have to just avoid making mistakes.
So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things we were discussing last night after the race. Myself, Mike, and Kevin went to our favorite diner and had our favorite meal and did our favorite thing. Complain about the race.
And say multiple times that we should have actually just recorded that and had that be the episode.
And have Kevin be part of the episode.
No matter how many times any of us said that, none of us took out our phones and did that. In fact, my phone was on the table and I didn't do that.
I kept expecting you to start the recording.
That would have been a good idea. So, but...
Either way, so the alternative to crash and burn is enduro.
Yes, that's the basic opposite thought.
So enduro, in our sense, because again, enduro can mean more than one thing, is there's, say, 3 minutes per lane, everyone starts at the line, you gun it, and it's how many laps you get over time, you run every lane, at the end of the night, whoever gets the most laps wins.
Right.
That's the most basic way to put it. Yes, there can be things about, switching from one section to the other, and we'll get into that later.
Well, maybe, I mean, those are finer points of it that are designed to be... I mean, they're actually designed to make it more fair.
Yeah.
Because if you were... I mean, just for argument's sake, if you were...
75% away or something.
About to click another lap, that lap doesn't just get erased when you move to the next lane. But anyway, yes, the basic premise of it is laps over time, which is how endurance racing works, hence enduro.
And the reason why NJ Hobby primarily does not do that is because it puts a lot of onus on the marshal.
Yeah. Because,
I mean, you don't want to call anybody shady and say they're putting your car on slowly, even though within even like Ecor, there are teams that are notorious for quote unquote doing that.
Yeah.
For purposely taking their time putting somebody back on because like, oh, hey, I got so many laps. If if Kevin falls off and I take my sweet time putting him back on, I'll win.
Right.
Crash and burn eliminates that because once somebody's off, they're off.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's true. You do have to... I mean, it's asking you to at least assume good faith or maybe even, God forbid, act in good faith, as the marshal to say, well, I'm trying the best I can at least to put the cars back on. I mean... Reslotting a slot car under pressure can actually be surprisingly difficult.
And there are people who are better at it than others, and that, again, goes into track position on who was in the starting grid. Because You know, if
Right,
you're,
because now, I mean, you actually, at that point, I never really thought about it.
yeah,
You know, because there's always the issue when you're racing of not even being next to a dirty racer, but just an incompetent one or a beginner, even, you know,
Yeah.
just to even take the value judgment out of it. Just somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience and is more likely to hit you. Well, you know, if you're next to that person, though, the plus side of that in an enduro is that they are not the person who's trying to help you if you crash. So, yeah, I mean, you know, with in the absence of an infinite, you know, in the of the 1/32 scale equivalent of SCCA, you know, marshals who volunteer their time on weekends to dress up in white jumpsuits and do marshalling. You know, there's no equivalent of that in slot car racing. You're asking the other racers to do it when they're not on the track. And, you know, if you come up on the losing end of some bad marshalling, I guess it's human nature to think, oh, that guy, you know, didn't help me get back on because he wanted to make it easier to beat me. I mean...
Or he's just a bad marshal. And again, it's your fault for falling off.
Yep.
The bottom line is, unless it's an egregious takeout, which we've already established there's nothing you could do, you shouldn't have fallen off. But it really is frustrating if, say, you fall off and somebody took you out and you both fell off, and then the marshal puts the person who caused the accident back on first.
Yeah, that's where it gets annoying.
Yeah.
Or worse yet, you fall off and then somewhere else on the track, because it does happen, because it breaks your rhythm when somebody falls off. Somebody else falls off elsewhere. They've already covered more distance than you have because you fell off first. And then the marshal
is holding your car,
but notices that person and takes care of that person first. Again, multitasking is not always easy. You know, I mean, everybody does it to some extent at some place in their lives. But look, sometimes I can speak to myself, for myself at work at least, the new task always takes precedence for me.
Yeah.
And I think that some people's brains are just wired that way. So, and I've caught myself doing it marshalling enduros where I pick up the car that crashed while I'm holding another car, put that car back on, and then remember I'm holding another car. So,
and that's why we primarily do Crash and Burn at NJ Hobbies, specifically because of the marshalling thing.
Yeah.
Because it causes arguments. It causes like, well, I would have won if like this guy hadn't held my car for that 15 seconds, which replicated an entire lap. And
right. Or 3 laps.
And we do some enduros. They're normally... enduro at NJ Hobby is a gimmick.
Yes.
You know, it's normally so we can make a joke like 24 minutes at Le Mans.
Right. It's usually it's usually tied in. It is a gimmick, and it's usually tied into another gimmick, which is a day-night race or technically, well, this is not a timed enduro; it's a lap count. But we do a 500 lap race, a 500 lap format sometimes, where you switch off with another person. You know, so then the team element is the gimmick, and the fact that it's marshaled is the gimmick. Yeah, I mean, it certainly is not our standard format, and I don't know how it would play if we shifted towards doing more of that. I mean, there was a time when I feel like we did more of it in the past than we do now.
There was definitely a time when, I think it was around when V-Horse turned to Ecor, and we were doing a lot of practicing on the Ecor schedule. Like,
well, that's true, too.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about way back...
in like the Tycho days?
Yeah, I'm way back, when the Aurora Tub track was still in there. I mean, now we're going back...
The 90s for the people who haven't been to NJ Hobby.
Well, I started racing in 2000, so... But yes, we are still talking about almost 20 years ago, which is terrifying. But I think the second or third race I ever ran was the only thing that was out of the ordinary. It was the first time I ever raced T-Jets, actually. The only thing that was out of the ordinary about it compared to any other format was that it was an enduro. It was 2-minute heats with GT bodies, and that was it. There was no gimmick to it. It was not a day-night race. It wasn't the format we used to do where you have to start with your car in pieces and put it together.
Yeah.
It wasn't a team race. There was no other gimmick to it except that it was an enduro.
And it was T-Jets, because T-Jets weren't exactly terribly common back then.
Yeah, T-Jet racing hadn't had the resurgence that it's had since then.
Which is its own episode, but...
Yes, why cars from 1963 are now the basis of club racing, yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least around here.
At least for HO, yeah.
Yeah.
Regionally speaking, they're the basis for club racing. They are perhaps the Miata of slot car racing.
Yeah, and me and Mike were talking about this before we turned on the microphone. Like, what are the alternatives if crash and burn is one side of the spectrum and enduro is the polar opposite? And there is an Ecor style of racing called shootout. And what shootout is it's a number of laps race. It's not a timed race, but
Oh, yeah, I guess that is almost the format they use with the Ecor Challenge.
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
You have, say, it's 10 laps. Everyone has to finish 10 laps. But once you finish, you can stop racing. So when the first guy gets 10, that's his order of finish. But if 2 and 3 are still fighting, they continue to fight.
Right.
And it's marshaled. So you get put back on the track.
Right.
The problem here is, A, the amount of time that takes to wait for literally every person in the building, or at least the first 3, because you know who got 4th,
Right.
to get, their 10 laps in. And B, it doesn't solve the marshalling issue.
Right.
Because you're still losing time, which in the grand scheme of things is important in that particular style.
Now, scoring wise, yeah. Now, how is that scored?
4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, so it still also matters who you're on with.
Exactly.
So that actually is the worst of both worlds. I mean, when we were talking about it earlier, I was not pondering the fact that it would have to, but yeah, because everybody's finishing all their laps.
Yeah.
Now, I'm spitballing. What if you did a set number of laps per lane, but you just flagged everybody at the end of the lap they're on, so that what you're getting is the number of laps you got, like in an
Ecor
enduro.
does do that.
So
Ecor
say
has
I
that as well.
Yeah, say I finish 10 laps, so I get 10 points. You're on lap 9, so you get 9 points. And if somebody's on lap 2, they get 2 points.
But that still matters who's on, because like if I'm on the track with, say, Kevin, who primarily I'm only getting like 6 laps in, and Kevin's knocking out 10, 10, 10, 10,
right,
10.
because he's torching you every time. Yeah.
Yeah. But what if I'm on the track and I have like Huey, Dewey, and Louie on with me?
So you're getting the 10s.
And I'm getting the 10s. That doesn't solve the problem of who I'm on the track.
I mean, you're always going to have the problem because you can't. I mean, I guess this is
and
the
that's
appeal.
why I was laughing at everybody last night, saying like, "Oh man, we need to find a new way so that."
There's no obvious way to solve it because you have a finite number of lanes.
Yeah.
Right? So if you have a different number of racers than lanes, there's always going to be a shortcoming. Unless you have everyone on an empty track just running laps, and then you post the times, and whoever sets the best time wins. But that's not very exciting.
And that's Rally.
Yeah.
Which we do once a year, again, as a gimmick.
Yeah. And it's actually, I don't think we're planning on doing it this year.
No, it wasn't terribly popular.
Yeah, I never got to do it. I always missed it. We did run it, and we did run a crash and burn with rally cars last year. Not a rally.
Again, it was just to get the cars out and running, because half the races we do are just to play with the toys we bought.
Right, of course. Yeah, I mean, just the time attack format would not be very exciting, because racing next to other cars is fun. It's more fun than racing on an empty track. So, I mean, the closest thing you get to a time attack racing other cars head to head is an enduro.
Yeah.
What's tricky about that is that because you're racing these 3 people head to head, but you're also racing everyone else who's already finished. So it's almost like racing a ghost in a video game, except you can't even see the ghost, so you can't pace yourself to it.
I've been calling it par racing.
Yeah.
So if I'm on the track doing an enduro, and this gives an advantage to people who go later in the enduro.
Yes, because they know where the bar is set.
Yeah, and essentially you're like, okay, so everyone's getting 22 laps on these lanes. If I want to win, I need to get 23.
At least 22, yeah. Or at least keep pace, yeah.
And it's one of those things where you can't feel defeated, like, oh man, I'm 2 laps off of what everyone else did in that other heat, because, maybe I can make it up in a... But then again, I'm not racing the people around me anymore. I'm racing a number.
Right, well, at least you have... Yeah. Then it's almost reverse psychology, because you do have the head-to-head racing, like trying to outbrake somebody into a corner or get off the corner faster. I mean, those are the things about real racing that we try to enjoy vicariously through slot car racing, because, I mean, sometimes you get the opportunity to do that driving to work, but for those of us whose only cars are daily and who don't go to track days and who don't do any club racing, this is the closest we'll ever get to, diving into a corner to get around someone. So, it's hard to suppress the urge to do it when you see the chance to do it. But if you're not really racing that person next to you, like if that person, you might be racing them right now in this 2-minute segment. I mean, calling it a heat is even misleading because it's not. If you're racing that person in this 2-minute segment and you're on pace with them in this segment, that doesn't mean anything because they might be 20 laps ahead of you or 20 laps behind you on the scoreboard.
And I can tell you personally, I race totally different if it's crash and burn versus enduro.
Well, and you should. I mean, you have to.
Because like enduro, even if somebody's on the same lap as me, I'm ignoring them.
Right.
Essentially, it's just and truth be told, you should really be doing that in crash and burn as well. You should be ignoring everyone.
Well, yeah, I mean, even
putting in the fastest lap times.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
not what you do. You try and catch someone. You try and walk away. You stop going fast because you have such a big lead. And you don't want to fall out.
You see it when you watch real racing on TV or in person. It's obvious when somebody is, when somebody is fighting someone, their aggression causes them to become less precise, and you always see it. The person who's behind those two people catches up. It's what happens. It slows you down. Racing somebody slows you down. That's why you'll have crew chiefs or engineers or whoever they are. Depending on the type of racing, the terminology changes. But you will have whoever is on the radio to the driver saying, don't worry about him, just hit your marks, just run your laps, because that's how you win. It doesn't matter whether you're counting laps or time, ultimately, because if you think about it, the point of a race is to get to the end of the race before the other person does. Obviously, track position is a marker of that, but ultimately, and this is, now we're getting into like a metaphysical concept of racing, track position is a symptom, right? Ultimately, the way you actually win the race is by covering the most distance in the least time.
Yeah.
It doesn't, the other cars, in a sense, don't matter. They only matter in that track position will allow them to slow you down. But, in real racing, that's has an asterisk next to it because of things like full course cautions. When everybody packs up behind the safety car, that sort of wipes out the time differences. And as rules have evolved in real racing to include things like the pits being closed when a yellow comes out, so you can't pit just on you might not be able to pit on a certain lap, and that messes up the pit sequence, so then somebody ends up in front of you because of that. So track position matters a little bit more in real racing than it would in its platonic ideal.
In a 3-minute slot car heat,
Yeah. But and it matters more in real racing now as it stands in most types of real racing than it would in some idealized form. But that can possibly be replicated a little bit more in slot car racing because you don't have those factors other than the occasional track call. But a track call stops you where you are. You don't go back to the line and start over together. So, yeah, I mean, really, you're right. The way of racing in an enduro is actually the right way to do it. You just ignore the other cars and run the fastest laps that you can.
And that's almost a reason why I like Crash and Burn better, because there's a lot more head-to-head. There's a lot more, I need to beat him, I need to do this, I need to... And you get a little, near the end of the race, points racing definitely comes in. You're like, okay, so I'm not going to win.
Right.
If I just sit here and get threes, I'll get a ribbon, and that's my, pigeon Shriner box reward. Get this little shiny thing.
It makes, ultimately winning, as you've said many times, you're not racing for life-saving medical devices. So,
yeah.
Winning is ultimately that too, just more of it. So.
And to kind of go into another topic, because we've run out of different racing formats, really, we introduced something that's a little controversial, and I don't know if anyone else does something like this, but we added in a handicap this year.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's any other club racers listening. I'm curious if any of your clubs do this, because I don't know how common or uncommon this is in the broader world of slot car racing.
We know that Equord doesn't do it, and Equord doesn't do it because they only have so many races a year. Like, they have 6 races all year.
Right. Well, because they are a regional club, so people are traveling distances to race. As
opposed to NJ Hobby, where it's, the same 8 to 10 of us every week.
Yeah, there's a core group, and then there's, guest stars, if you will, that come and go.
And the reason we have this handicap system is because of the guest stars. And last night, I can tell you, I got a 3rd place ribbon.
Yeah.
And I felt good that, my car, which dead to rights had no reason to be in the top 3.
Right.
It really had no benefit there. But I got a third place and I felt okay about it, but I can tell you there were definitely kids there who would have felt a lot better getting that third. Because when you're first starting to race, getting those ribbons and getting that positive reinforcement and seeing yourself do better every week is what keeps you coming back.
Well, hell, I mean, we've now run 3 races over 2 weeks, and I've been shut out. And I'm like, why am I even doing this?
Exactly.
And I've been doing this for, nigh on 20 years, and, I know that's not going to stay that way. But, we ran 3 races so far, and 2 of them were races that I actually enjoy running and look forward to. And last night I actually had a really good car, and I still, I just couldn't get the job done for various reasons. And losing sucks.
It does. So to kind of take us back to where we started here, we have a handicap now, so that the same people don't win every week, or at least we've made it significantly harder.
Right. I mean, the last time we went down this road, it ended up not making that much difference.
And spoiler, it hasn't made any difference yet either.
So far, it has not. It broke a tie for third that didn't matter.
In a qualifier. Only the top 2 were making it to the final anyway.
It made no practical difference.
So before we get too far into this, let's explain exactly what's going on here. So every time you win, if you get a first place in a final, you get -3 to your score next time.
Correct.
Assuming there's the same number of heats. And let's not get into that. Let's just say 3 points. Second place, 2 points. Third place, 1 point.
Right.
So that this way, if you show up and you win, 3 weeks in a row, now you're negative
-9. Yeah, which is a significant disadvantage. I mean, when you consider that, a good score would be, an excellent score would be 40.
Yeah.
The maximum score would be 48. So even if you ran a perfect score, you would be giving up 20% of your points, and if you ran less than that, you'd be giving up more than 20% of your points.
And essentially, it takes some really legitimate entries and turns them into zeros. And here's the other gag: if you finish anywhere in the top 3, you keep adding on to your handicap.
Right.
So, say you should have been first, the handicap knocked you down to third. You're still getting another point on your handicap.
And I never thought about that angle on it until Kevin, who was the
reason the handicap system got abolished.
He was both he was one of the reasons it was created, and he was the reason it was abolished. Because his handicap was approaching infinity at one point, and yet he was still finding ways to win. So
he was still adding to his handicap every week. So it was reintroduced this week to try and get some of the more novice racers more podium finishes. But we don't really have any proof that the handicapping system works. And even worse than that.
Look, it's not possible to generate a large enough sample to figure out whether it matters. Because there's not enough racers, there's not enough races, you can't run the scenario enough times to generate enough data to have any confidence in whether it works. Let's just put that on the table. The margin of error on this is massive.
Yeah.
So
and all it really does, in my opinion, when I'm looking at it, is create arguments.
Yeah.
Because people are like, oh man, this handicap's killing me. Oh, it's going to be part of the final or the qualifier, which is a question we answered incorrectly last night.
It would have been annoying. It actually would have made more of a difference if we applied it to the final.
Yeah.
By the way. So actually it still wouldn't have made a difference. As it played out, it wouldn't have made a difference. But I think it would have been more apt to make a difference if we applied it to the final, but
the whole point is to get different people into the winner's circle, and if we don't put it in the qualifier,
right, then those people will already be eliminated.
Well,
that was exactly my thinking in recommending we apply it to the qualifier.
Yeah.
And furthermore, when you are on a streak of not doing well, just the slight glimmer of hope that comes from making it to the final and getting to do some extra racing can, make you feel a lot better about how things are going.
And again, that's why whenever I'm in charge of the races, I make sure we do at least 3 heats minimum. Because if you don't make it to the final, and it's 2 heats per lane and there's 4 lanes, that's like 10 minutes of racing and you're done.
Right. Yeah, and you've invested your whole evening to do the activity for 10 minutes.
And then people look at you with like that eye if you don't stick around to marshal.
Right.
Because I got my butt kicked in the first heat. Now there's a second heat and a final I have to stick around for.
Yeah,
I'm no longer part of.
Yeah, that happened to me last night. I was there, for 4 hours, and for 3 of those hours I had already been eliminated. So No, it wasn't that long. It was 3 hours, and probably for more than 2/3 of the time I was there was no actual reason for me to be there. Other than that, I had nothing better to do.
And you hung out with me and Kevin afterwards. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not like
that's
you were
right.
just there to pout.
Right.
And you were definitely one of the only 2 marshals in the final, because if you're not part of the final, people tend to ditch.
Yeah, which, when we, in HO season where there are 6 lanes, and therefore a final happening means that there are 12 racers.
Which is, significantly harder.
Yeah, it also, though, means that, I mean, we had 9 people last night, which was just enough to need to do a final.
Yeah.
So it didn't take that many people leaving. I mean, only 3 people left, and that left us with only 2 marshals. So, because 4 were in the final, and 2 were marshalling, and 3 left.
Yeah.
So,
and it causes problems like that, but there's really no way to get those people to stick around. We used to do a door prize to try and get them to stick around.
I forgot about that. I won a couple of those.
And I think we just stopped doing that.
Well, they were kind of white elephants, if we're honest. I mean, I won a 1/18 scale Darrell Waltrip car.
Well, there were things like that. It was really a way for NJ Hobby to get rid of some things that would never sell.
Yeah.
Also, I think one time it turned to $5, but you had to spend it that night.
Yeah.
You couldn't bank them.
That's right. That's right.
So there's really no motivating factor to stick around once you've been eliminated, because there's no losers bracket. There's no high five. You were the first loser.
Yeah, I would have liked to have run a losers bracket last night and stomped the other people that got eliminated, because I definitely was the least bad person to get eliminated.
Yeah. And there was even a request to do more double headers.
Yeah.
But the reason the doubleheader works right now, because it comes down to prize support.
Right.
The doubleheader is working right now because the prize support is getting pooled, and it's going to turn into a large item at the end.
Well, we have a doubleheader coming up in 2 weeks, which is the non-magnet Group C and yes magnet Group C.
But there would probably be 2 race entries then.
There would be.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna. Oh, you mean a doubleheader in that you pay once and race twice?
Which is what we're doing with the series race.
Right. Well, you're right. That works because we're banking the prize fund.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really wouldn't. I mean, I don't know.
Because are you going to pay 2 entries to do 2 3-heat races?
Maybe. I mean, I am.
I mean, so am I, because I really don't have a secondary option.
Right. And, I mean, I have cars ready for both of them. Hey, you know what? Kevin was going to lend me his...
Oh, and he didn't?
Nope.
Good. That means I have to make one, huh?
Yep.
Darn it.
Unless we can get it...
I'm not going to Easton.
No. Okay, then.
Well...
Way to go, Kevin.
Kevin, when you're listening to this, definitely not tomorrow because of how the release schedule works.
Right. In fact, yeah, half the time between the race we're talking about and now will have elapsed.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good place
to end.
Well,
now Brian has a project to do.
Pretty much. I mean, because I should probably put some stuffs on screen.
Yeah.
We don't have the technical difficulties.
I meant building a car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end this particular episode, because I think that's a good place to end it. Other club racers, if you're listening to this, let us know what your format of racing is, if you use a handicapping system.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be curious to know, because, I mean, we're always trying to modify things to make it a little bit more fair for people. After years of nothing ever changing, I mean, we are kind of trying things now to see, what keeps things a little more interesting, and just sort of raises the fun factor while limiting the amount of squabbling that happens. So if anybody has any bright ideas.
All right, folks. Thanks for coming along this ride with us. Remember to go into the description and go to our Teespring page to buy some fine BTE merchandise. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Again, we have been known to make entire episodes out of a single user comment.
Yep.
So feel free to leave a comment that's not trolling us or blatant spam.
Yeah.
And we will mention it on the air.
Yeah. So then you can hear it next time. You listener, one listener.
You, one listener, you. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming out, and we'll see you next time.